Is it live? Ja, dit is. Hy wys by my dit is. Is dit live? Ja, dit is. Hy wys by my dit is. Hi, everyone. Let's just give a few minutes for some people to join still. I don't know if everybody is live yet. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, I am Yolande Ribberink. I'm an autism specialist, autism needs educator, special needs educator, remedial therapist, and sometimes autism parent coach. So just to give you a little bit of background, my tertiary education background is in psychology and special needs education, specifically autism and ADHD. I've also done numerous courses in neurodevelopment of children, and more specifically, neurochemistry, neurophysiology, and neuroanatomy, so that we can understand the brain and how it ties into the development of children on the spectrum. I'm originally from South Africa, but I've been living in the Netherlands for the past 2 years. So this is, as you know, about the role that the brain-body disconnect plays. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at the brain-body disconnect in terms of interoception, etc. But today we are specifically going to look at the brain-body disconnect and the effect it has on behavior. And one of the things that I hope you'll take away from this session is an understanding of why your child behaves the way they do some of the time. Sometimes it isn't so obvious why they're behaving the way they are, and I'm hoping that by giving you more insight into the biological reason behind the behavior and what is actually going on in the brain when you see certain behavior, that it will give you a better understanding of what happens when your autistic child has a meltdown. But this can be true for any child, not just children on the spectrum. However, we do see more meltdowns with our neurodivergent children. So I'm very happy to be here. So the traditional way of looking at behavior is to kind of classify it into good or bad behavior. So I'm going to start sharing my screen with you now. Okay. Sorry, just bear with me. I just want to get the link. So, like I said, the problem with classifying our kids into good or bad behavior is that we are classifying the symptoms of the behavior, and we're not actually looking at the root cause of that behavior. What I'm going to say here today goes for any child. Like I said, not just the ones on the spectrum. But what makes it different for children on the spectrum is the following. Behavior is communication. And that is where our kiddos on the spectrum have the most problems with. So in order to be diagnosed with autism as a rule, you have to have communication problems. That's one of the triads of the autism diagnoses. So for everyone understanding it, and I'm saying problems with communication, whether verbal or non-verbal, and I know, please don't get mad, I know we prefer the term speaking and non-speaking, but for purposes of this, I'm going to say non-verbal. And that just doesn't just mean communication in terms of saying words. and speaking, but also our body language, our eye contact, and all of the other communication things that our kids on the spectrum have a problem with. So, what we do when we classify behavior into good behavior or bad behavior is we look at behavior as if it is a personality trait or something similar to morals and ethics. And it is not. Again, behavior is communication. So we look at it as if behavior is always chosen. And a lot of the times when our children have a meltdown, it is not chosen behavior. And I'm going to show you today why I say it's not chosen behavior. It is because what happens inside of the brain that we cannot say that the behavior is intentional or chosen. And that is why we cannot say that this is a good child, that is a bad child based on behavior. Okay, so why do some kids with autism yell or hit while others run away? If you've ever seen a child on the spectrum run, you'll know what I mean by running away. And why do some seem to understand but still don't follow through? So you know they understand you, but they do not react. It is important to understand the biological reasons behind this behavior. So let's see, we're going to learn about emotional overload and why your kids can't comply, and we're going to see if we can help them improve. So this is the ASD iceberg, the Autism Spectrum Disorder iceberg, and I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with it. So if you look above this little squiggly line, this is what we see, what the people around us see, what teachers see. They see an anxious child. They see a child that has obsessions, whether with trains or computers or dinosaurs. They see that they're easily upset by change. They've got arguments. They don't play with kids well. They have repetitive activity. They shout out. They struggle with friendships. And if we say it's a good or a bad child based on behavior, this is what we're looking at. But what we actually should be looking at is the why. Why in autism spectrum disorder? Why do they have obsessions? Why are they upset by change? Why do they enjoy repetitive activities? And that is, in the first instance, because of the triad of the diagnoses, which is a problem with social interaction, a problem with social communication, and flexibility, but also a lot of other sensory sensitivity. So if you're a parent or a teacher that know kids on the spectrum, you will know that they have a lot of sensory issues. They are sensory hypersensitive, and that is not just for sound, touch, taste, smell, vision, pain, but also proprioception and interoception. So there's a lot of things that happens on the bottom. I usually say it's an iceberg, so it happens under the water. And the things that we see above the water is only, it's not the root causes. That is only the symptoms. Okay, so this is a mantra that I like to use, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a parent. I know how difficult it can be some days, and some days you feel like you're losing your mind, and it is not an easy job, whether you're the parent or a teacher, but your child isn't giving you a hard time. No child on the spectrum is giving you a hard time. That child is having a hard time, and that is where the behavior is coming from. Okay, so if you look at this picture, and I'm sure a lot of you have had this, control your child. So a lot of people have this very traditional idea of parenting, and I must admit, I had that too. Very authoritarian, to be honest. I had the same until I really started working with children on the spectrum and understanding the biology behind the behavior. It is also very helpful to understand the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. Okay? Just because we are looking at things differently, it doesn't mean that tantrums have exited the stage and there's no such thing as a tantrum. There's a very definite difference between a meltdown and a tantrum. And if you're a teacher for kids on the spectrum or a parent, you will absolutely know the difference. Unfortunately, we come, and I specifically chose this photo of a child in the shops because that is usually where they get very overwhelmed and they start to have a meltdown. And you get all the looks and the whispers, and can't that person do something about that child, control their child. That is where other people do not understand the difference between a meltdown and a good old run-of-the-mill temper tantrum. So most parents, like I said, know what is a meltdown, okay? But on a side note, those judging looks that come from people who do not have children whose brains are bombarded by those senses in the shop, I always wish I can tell them what it must feel like to an autistic child. So if you can just imagine yourself being a sensory sensitive child standing in a place with too many people around you that you don't know, a place with bright fluorescent lights that doesn't seem to bother anybody else, but for you it flickers, for you it makes a sound. Imagine hearing all of those people speak, the sounds of the trolleys clinging and clanking, the wheels squeaking, all the different smells of people's perfumes and food and chemicals, and you are hypersensitive to smell. Thousands of different colors assaulting your eyes and making them feel completely out of focus. So what I usually tell people is picture yourself going into your home. Go in, put on all your lights. Have someone stand by the light switch and keep on switching it on and off to create flickering. Go put on your television as loud as you can. Put on your stereo as loud as you can. Have a couple of friends sit in the same room and have them talk as loud as they can while they're in the room. Then paint the room with the brightest of colors, like really bright colors. Add to that you are not wearing normal clothes, but the itchiest, scratchiest sweater without a t-shirt underneath that you've ever worn in your life, directly on top of your skin. And see how long you can keep from screaming, because that is the assault on the senses that an autism child has to endure. So it's everything. And then we expect them to walk nice and quietly through the aisles in the shop and not be frustrated. That is almost superhuman to expect. Okay. So the next slide is relinquish control. So most of you might be going, what? Is she mad? If I relinquish control to my autistic child, the world as we know it will cease to exist. And you may have a point, but this is not what I mean. When I say that, I mean giving them a sense of control. What I mean by this is giving the child measured choices. Do you want to wear the blue shirt or the red shirt? Do you want to eat a banana or a peach? Not all of our kiddos on the spectrum are there to show their choices yet. Communicating their choices might still be a work in progress. They might still be busy with AAC techniques, but a lot of them are there already. But it is a good start to meet the child where they are at and to provide choices in a way that each individual can understand. So by giving them appropriate options, they feel a sense of control. For autistic kids, in the example above, for instance, where we know the child has problems with loud noises, we can carry what I call a sensory toolbox with us to the shops. So in other words, they can put on noise-cancelling headphones to give them the choice to say, we are going into the shop, it is going to be loud, would you like to wear your noise-cancelling headphones? It's going to depend on different situations and different children. Like I always say, if you've seen one child with autism, you've seen one child with autism. It's not the same. So you know your child's best as a parent, and teachers also know them very well. And I think if you think about it for a while, you might come up with a lot of creative choices to put in your sensory toolbox. So giving kids with ADHD and autism some control is important because so much of the time they don't get a say in what is happening to them, especially our non-speaking ones. And we expect them to just adjust to any choice that we make for them. Again, put yourself in their shoes. Would you like it if someone decided every little thing for you each day from the moment that you open your eyes and never bother to ask you anything? When we work with children or have a toddler, and we are baby-proofing a house, for instance, the first thing we learn is to get down to the child's level and see what the dangers are on that level, see the hazards. The same should be done for our kids on the spectrum. Meet them where they are at and try to take their wants in consideration as well. By giving them a voice and giving them a choice, it automatically improves behavior. Non-speaking does not mean non-thinking. Cognitively, I believe they're completely intact. Remember that. It is all about honoring and empowering our kids on the spectrum. You are your child's advocate. If you want other neurotypical people, yes, the judgy people in the shops, to show respect and dignity to your child, you need to lead by example. So, that being said, if you have tried everything to improve behavior, but they still get really bad meltdowns, and you can't understand why anything that everybody has told you, do this, do that, isn't working, I'm going to tell you now why it isn't working. What is happening in the brain? Okay, so if we look at this picture of the brain, we have the cortex, the limbic system, and the amygdala. So these are the three, obviously that's not the only parts in the brain, hopefully, but these are the three important parts of the brain that deals with behavior. So I always say the cortex is like the air traffic controller. So if you imagine, if you've ever gone on an aeroplane, that person that sits in that little office and look at all of the airplanes landing and having to make the choices of which one can come into land and which one must still hover a little bit in the air. That is our air traffic controller, or the cortex, also known as the prefrontal cortex. And that is where rational thinking takes place. So this is in the front of the brain, and that is the part of the brain that handles our processing, our decision making. So think of that air traffic controller as watching all the information on the screens and making all the decisions on the best course of action to take. And that cortex or air traffic controller is directing the body in how it should respond in certain circumstances. Then we get the limbic system. So the limbic system is known as the panic monkey. Okay? So that is our emotional or feeling brain. And the limbic system is a very, very active part in the brain when you're autistic. So the limbic brain is our health and safety officer. So if you guys have ever worked with a health and safety officer, sometimes you'd think, I'm just going to quickly climb on this chair and get off that file. And if the health and safety officer sees you, you'll be in big trouble. So they are very prone to overreacting. And the same can be said for the panic monkey, which is our health and safety officer in our limbic system. Anything that could possibly cause harm or risk causes them to worry, or the monkey to worry. Then we've got the amygdala, which is here by the brain stem at the bottom where your neck and your spinal cord and your head meet. That is the amygdala, or it's by the brain stem. So that is our instinctual brain. It is pure instinct. So you'll see there is a dinosaur in a cage, and we call it our dino brain. So the dinosaur is like a specialist. He can only do one task, and that is to stop you from dying. Unfortunately, the dinosaur can't make its own decisions. The only thing it does is it trusts the panic monkey. And the panic monkey is a drama queen. Okay. So the dinosaur cannot judge a threat situation. And the panic monkey is prone to jump to conclusions. So this is already a recipe for disaster, if you ask me. So it's the panic monkey, remember in the limbic system, it's the panic monkey's job to look out for threats and to take protective action. So if it's not urgent, so the panic monkey is going to get information, say, for example, through one of our sensors. There's a very loud bell that's ringing, And panic monkey knows that bell, it's the church bell, it's not going to bother him. So it's normal. And he will just then use his tried and trusted defense routines. In other words, he will send it through to the air traffic controller, and the air traffic controller will decide what to do with it. But if it is like the autistic child in the shop and there's an overload on their senses, like it's sounds and smells and lights and everything is just a bombardment on their senses, the panic monkey is then getting stressed. So he is like firing away messages to the air traffic controller. If you think on the air traffic controller is getting WhatsApps and faxes and emails, and everything is urgent, urgent, urgent. And now the air traffic controller can't manage with the situation. So she is completely overloaded and getting a panic attack and curled up, whimpering in a corner. And that is when the panic monkey sees, okay, the air traffic controller cannot handle this anymore. And he gives all the things. He calls Dino Brain, he opens his cage and he says, you are now in charge. You need to save our life. Okay. And Dino Brain is our protective system. When panic monkey thinks we are in serious danger, it will call on Dino Brain to take all functions over from air traffic controller. So in other words, your amygdala is taking all the functions over from your cortex, where logical thinking is happening. So if you think about it, it means that in that moment where the amygdala takes over, it is no way that a child can make rational decisions because the air traffic controller is not working. She's hiding under the desk in a fetal position. So Dino Brain is pure reflex. So it can respond really quickly to any threat. And its one job is to keep you alive, but it relies solely on panic monkey or the limbic system for information. It cannot do any thinking on its own, apart from deciding which protective response to use. So think about what I'm saying here. Pure reflex takes over from rational thinking. Have you ever seen an autistic child turn around and start running for dear life, or hitting or kicking or biting? That is pure reflex. At that moment, they are not capable of rational thinking. And if you think you are going to be able to stand there and say, please stop crying, please stop hitting, please stop biting, and they are going to be able to listen to you, it's just not going to happen. They cannot, because they cannot think rationally at that moment. They are purely thinking with the amygdala or the Dino Brain. So the Dino Brain talks to no one but panic monkey or your limbic system. And once it takes charge, it locks everyone else out. So any interference from the air traffic controller will only slow things down and cost vital survival seconds. Even with panic monkey, the only communication is the question, safe or not safe. That's all the Dino Brain or the amygdala asks. So while panic monkey, the health and safety officer, says it isn't safe, Dino Brain will stay in charge. Okay, so the Dino Brain has 5 protective responses to choose from: fight, flight, flood, flop, or freeze. Fight and flight responses are usually known as meltdowns. That is what we know as a meltdown. In self-defense, we either fight the attacker or run away from it. Those can be really severe with our kids on the spectrum. The other is the flood response. Those are our children that burst into tears, that cry as if there are no tomorrow. It's a huge emotional response. It's not 2 or 3 tears. They become wailing snot monsters, and they encourage others to come and protect them. So it will be screaming bloody murder. And the last are the flop and the freeze responses. This is what we see often you do see it in the younger autistic kids as well, but often in older ones. They just shut down. You see this a lot in kids with ADHD as well. the teacher will say, but your child isn't listening, he's just looking at me, he's not answering me. At that stage, the child can't answer you. He has shut down. He is in the amygdala, the dinosaur brain, and his limbic system is not reacting to you. So that is almost like playing dead so that you don't arouse the interest of your attacker. Flop is where you can feel a meltdown inside, which happens a lot with the autistic kids. They feel the meltdown, but they don't show it. And the only thing that you eventually see is when they start self-harming, or when they are so far in the meltdown that you don't even know what to do. So freeze is where dino brain switches off your body, sometimes your brain as well. So you become very still and of no interest to the attacker. You might find that you are awake, but that you cannot move or respond. Okay, so now the process of a meltdown, when panic monkey and dino brain try to help. Okay, so when panic monkey thinks it has seen a threat, so that is your limbic system, it has seen a threat. It first raises the issue with the air traffic controller, who, if things are going well, like I said, deals with the situation. She can either take appropriate action or reassure panic monkey to say there's no threat, we've heard this a million times, or we've seen this a million times, and that will regulate and calm panic monkey or the limbic system down. However, if the threat is seen as too severe for the air traffic controller or the prefrontal cortex, and it gets overloaded, highly stressed and struggling to deal with all the signals, then panic monkey or the limbic system will try to help out. But panic monkey isn't qualified. So he can get things wrong and make mistakes. So sometimes it's just a noise or just something small like a light flickering. And he goes into overload, and air traffic controller will have to focus on fixing panic monkey's help rather than their usual day-to-day operations. And that is when the air controller is less able to function to do what she needs to do. So the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes. As an overwhelm progresses, panic monkey feels less and less safe. So the air traffic controller can now do nothing to stop this monkey or the limbic system from bouncing around the control room, pushing buttons everywhere. So he just feels he desperately needs help. This is what we call the rumbling stage. We'll get there. And preferably by a trusted human. So the pressure is taking off panic monkey. He's just jumping around. If nobody can help, then panic monkey turns around and wakes up dino brain. He opens that gate and dino brain or the amygdala takes charge. Dino brain starts crashing around that control room. So now the controls are getting broken. The sensors go haywire. Motor control can be hard to access. Emotion chemicals start to flood our nervous system. So that is your adrenaline that is starting to flood your nervous system. Panic monkey is now basically screaming, we are going to die, over and over. We start acting in ways we don't recognize as our dino brain or the amygdala starts to take over. The air traffic controller or the prefrontal cortex is still hanging in there, but losing. When the full meltdown hits, this is the point where dino brain shoves the air traffic controller out of the control room and locks the door. So there is no way that the air traffic controller or the prefrontal cortex can do anything. No rational thought. Locked out. Cannot get into the room to press any of the needed buttons. So the air traffic controller can see what is going on, but cannot do anything. The only decision dino brain, who is now in charge and moving his big body all around the room, can make is to decide which protective mechanism to use, whether it's going to be fight, flight, flood, fawn, flop, or freeze. Okay. It can choose a visible one, fight, flight, or flood. In other words, crying that can be seen, flight that's running away, or fighting, hitting, kicking, screaming, biting. And those are usually labeled as meltdowns, like I said. It can choose a more hidden or invisible one, like flop or freeze, which are usually labeled as shutdown, so the child is just not responding anymore. The more you talk, the less the child is responding. You can scream, you can talk, you can stand on your knees, nothing is going to happen. The choice might depend on the situation. So some children are more prone to going into meltdowns, and some children are more prone to going into shutdowns, but it depends on the situation. It can alternate. So when Panic Monthly finally decides that the crisis has been averted, and if you've got a child on the spectrum, you know that this can take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, 3 hours, 5 hours, easily, okay? So when Panic Monkey decides that the crisis has been averted and tells Dino Brain we are safe, and tells Dino Brain, go back to your cage, step down, we are safe, we don't need you anymore. Then they go, Dino Brain leaves, and they let the air traffic controller back in the room. But as you can imagine, the monkey has been jumping around in that small control room. The big dinosaur has been fighting there and breaking stuff. So there's a huge aftermath. So it doesn't just stop. And this is one of the important things you need to remember with the difference between a meltdown and what a meltdown is and what a tantrum is. With a meltdown, there's a huge aftermath. Okay, children often cannot remember what happened. They can be very tired. So the dino is very strong. So he could have caused a lot of damage, like I said. And sometimes it can take a child hours or even days to go back to the proper and regulate themselves and go back to the status quo of where their brain was before the meltdown happened. So Panic Monkey can still be jittery and on edge because of this traumatic event. So he is still a little bit not right, hours or days afterwards. And he may start remembering other past mistakes and exaggerating them. So for the next couple of hours or days after a big meltdown, you will see that that child isn't the same. Their brain hasn't quite shifted back to rational thinking. It is still there where every little thing, it's like a deer in the headlights. Every movement, light, they are rattly, and it is so easy or much easier for them to go back into meltdown or shutdown mode. So if these meltdowns keep happening, Panic Monkey learns mistakenly to link the real trauma of the meltdown to the events leading up to it. So, and this is where we think, but it's not logical. Why does my child start screaming when I am half a mile from school? Why are they already start screaming? Nothing happened. Why is my child screaming when I take their favorite blanket away? Nothing happened. But that is the brain, that is the limbic system that has not taken the action, the actual action that started the whole trauma as something that is dangerous. But now it is taking the thing that happened in the beginning, the simple task of just taking something from them or just driving in the street where the school is. And it is seeing that as a threat. And that gives repeated meltdowns, and it keeps reinforcing the belief of a threat. So eventually, every day, the ride to school is going to be one big meltdown because the brain is now associating a different thing to it. So the threat can become so intense that Panic Monkey or the limbic system stops even talking to the air traffic controller about the risk. So when he sees us driving down, the limbic system notices, see, we are going down that road, in the road where the school is. It is not even going to ask the air traffic controller, listen, is there really a risk? Is this safe? It's just going to see same road, same school, jump straight to releasing Dino Brain out of his cage. And wow, gone is the logical part of that child's brain, and we are in meltdown city. So seeing things that may well be low risk but responding to it as if it's a life-threatening danger is a trauma response. So a child might be extremely fearful of, say, for instance, the vacuum cleaner, because they once had a meltdown because of that sound. They didn't know that sound. They had a big meltdown. And the brain, the limbic system, has now put the trauma response as the danger sign. So the the cortex is not even going to come in it. If the limbic system hears that assault on the senses, that loud noise that the Hoover makes, it's going to stop talking, not going to ask, is this really dangerous? Is this not dangerous? Because he cannot ask that, because he's bypassing the air traffic controller, and logic can't address it. Okay, so meltdowns. Can we reduce panic monkey or the limbic system's workload? So remember, the limbic system, for all intents and purposes, it's almost like where an Alice band will sit with your ears. You'll have the sensory strip and you will have the motor strip, which is next to each other. So panic monkey takes their health and safety job very seriously. There are several reasons why they might jump into action to try and help, ultimately ending in a meltdown. So if our senses are overloading, so if an autistic child, if they get sensory overload, you can almost be certain that they are going to go into a meltdown. If our logical brain is overloaded with more than air traffic controller can cope with processing. So this happens when a child is learning and somebody is trying to teach them something very fast and they are expecting them to answer directly. So a lot of our kids have processing time issues. So it takes a little bit longer, but the teacher is, come on, give me the answer. What do you think it is? That child is going to get anxiety, cannot cope with the fast processing, and the air traffic controller will become overloaded. If the child's energy levels get too low, so that's the same for all children when they get tired. If something happens that feels unsafe, so if it's something that they might get into trouble, or people suddenly starting to shout and they don't know why they're shouting about, or if we lose something, and this is a very big one for our autistic kids, lose something we need that panic monkey believes usually keeps us safe. That will also register as a survival threat. So I'm talking here about our kids that have their little papers that they walk with. I knew a child that had a bubblegum wrapper walking with. I knew a child with clothing pegs walking with it. And if that clothing peg gets lost or that bubblegum wrapper, there will be hell to pay. That's a promise. And that is exactly the same thing. The limbic system, that child uses that paper wrapper or clothing peg to regulate himself, to keep his emotions calm, to not get over anxious. The moment that is lost, it gets anxiety, panic monkey or the limbic system goes into overdrive, opens up the dinosaur's gate, and gone is rational thoughts. Full-blown meltdown. So a lot of people don't understand meltdowns and mistakenly call them tantrums. That's because they don't usually notice the threats that our enthusiastic health and safety officer detects. So panic monkey just tries really hard to keep us safe, but you already know that. So I'm going to show you a quick clip, and then you can decide for yourself, is this a tantrum or is this a meltdown?
Hello.
Okay, guys, so if you've seen in that clip, that is definitely a tantrum. That is not a meltdown. And I think any autistic parent or teacher or professional can tell you that is not a meltdown, that is a temper tantrum. So the child is crying and running away. Mom is ignoring him, which is the right thing to do, going into the kitchen. Then the child hears the father coming in saying hello, and somebody moves with the camera to the kitchen, and the child has begun to calm down. And when he sees he's getting attention, that they are moving with the camera towards him, all hell breaks loose and it's crying and screaming all over again. Definitely not a meltdown. So there's a definite difference. Now I want to speak about the rumble rage cycle. So this is something that Dr. Brenda Miles, she's a professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Kansas, that she came up with. So she has said that there are three main stages for individuals with autism that they go through when they are in a rage or experiencing a meltdown. So the first is the rumbling stage. So this stage is very important. This is the stage and the only stage where you can stop a meltdown. If you cannot stop the meltdown in the rumbling stage and it goes over to the rage stage, it's game over. Then it needs to just take its course until it's finished and it can go into the recovery stage. Okay. So the rumbling stage. The rumbling stage of an ensuing meltdown is the first stage. So sometimes there are signs, and I think most parents know the signs. The sad thing is teachers only get to know the signs at the end of the year when they know the kids really well. And I think it would be brilliant if parents can tell their teachers, listen, these are the signs for my kid. This is what you need to look out for. So it could be a child can start clearing their throats. They can get their face or ears can start getting red. They can start grimacing, speaking in a lower or a higher voice, tensing their muscles, biting on their teeth, tapping their feet or their fingers, start stimming faster and faster. Okay, so there are a lot of things, and not everyone is the same, and it can be a million things. But you as a parent will know, if you see your child doing that, you know this child of mine is agitated and irritated. And it will really help if you tell the teacher what your child's specific rumblings are. So one good intervention, and this is the only stage where you can intervene, the rumbling stage. So a good intervention is called the antiseptic bouncing. Now, I have no idea why it was called that. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why they called it the antiseptic bouncing, but there it is. So this is a technique that involves removing a student in a non-punitive fashion from the environment in which she is experiencing difficulty. So please understand, this is not sending a child outside of a classroom or locking him outside of a house or anything to that stage. This is the rumbling stage. The breakdown hasn't begun, but you can see the signs are there. So in a school environment, it would be a teacher speaking to another teacher, telling that teacher, listen, if a child comes into your class telling you that he's bringing a note from me, just look at the note, let the child sit there for a bit, and then let him calm down. He needs to get out of the environment. So what would happen? Teacher A will send the child that she can see. Peter is now tapping his feet. His ears are getting red. Something is boiling underneath the surface. She will say, Peter, please come here. Please take this note. And she can scribble anything, even just a smiley face in the note, and say, go to Mr. Benson and give him this note. And when Peter comes with a note, Mr. Benson knows, okay, this child needs to get away from the environment. He will say, come in, sit there. I'm just a little bit busy. I will give an answer to your teacher just now. And the child will sit there. You can give him a pen and a paper and say, just draw a little bit until I get you. And he can go on with a while until he sees that he doesn't see the feet tapping or the red ears or whatever the case may be, until he sees that the child has calmed down. And then he can just sign something in the paper and say, all's well, and sent the child back. The child would not know. He's not embarrassed by the situation, but he got out of the environment and we diffused the situation. Same with parents. Like the mom and dad can say, if she can see, she's in the bathroom and she can see dad is outside, but the child is with her in the bathroom and she can see something's happening. She can tell the child, go to your dad and ask him what happened today at work. And the dad will know. If the child comes and asks what happened today at work, he will know. He is now having to lie through his teeth and get something very important to tell that child just to get the attention away. Now, this is a lot more difficult if we have nonverbal kids, younger nonverbal kids. It is even more difficult. But that is one of the interventions that can be used. So there are more rumbling practical strategies. The one is proximity control. A lot of children start to pace or walk around, and you might just stand there and look at them walking around. Don't try and stop them. Don't tell them to go sit down. Let them walk. It calms them down. It's a way that they are using to regulate themselves. You can use signal interference. So sometimes you don't want to tell a child, listen, I can see you are panicking. Just go to the calm down corner or do that. You don't, or go outside and jump on the trampoline. You don't want to say that because you don't want to embarrass the child or you don't want to make them aware. But you can have a non-verbal signal, for example. So the teacher can use a card that shows a fidget. And in the calm down corner, there is a fidget. And she can give him a fidget card without anything. She can go on with the lesson, just give him the fidget card. And that child knows he can get up and he can go sit at the back and he can play with the fidget. That is not getting out of work. That is not doing something untoward. That is giving the child time to regulate himself. You can also give them support from a routine. So a lot of the kids, you might be teaching or the parent might be taking a little bit longer. There's a long queue in the shop. So the parent might be taking a little bit longer than anticipated. And the child, you can see it is happening. He is in that rumbling stage. And you're fearing that there's going to be a huge meltdown coming. If you have choice boards, like a first and then choice board, and I'm sure most of you know what it is, but if you don't, you're welcome to email me and I'll tell you what it is, where you can put up and you bring it with you always to the shop. It's part of your security blanket for the parents. So you will show first shop, then swim. Because you've told the child, we are going to the shops, but as soon as we get home, we can go swimming, or you can play on your iPad for a little while, or whatever the case may be. So just show them the first then board so that they know, okay, it's taking long, but I don't have to get anxious and I don't have to stress. We are still on the same thing. The same things that my mom or dad told me is going to happen is still going to happen. Then we get the walk and don't talk. So simply walking with a child without verbal communication can calm a rumbling behavior down. So you can just tell your child, listen, you see there's a rumbling going on, and you tell them, let's go for a walk. You don't speak to your child. You're not saying, why were you mean? Why were you not listening? Why? Just walk with them. Don't say a word. Okay. You just stay calm, not confrontational. Even if the child is verbal and says something to you, you stay calm and just walk. Remember, just walk, don't talk. Okay, so the rage stage. The rumbling stage is gone. We're at the rage stage of the meltdown cycle. And this is the most challenging for parents and teachers alike. This is when the child has not cooperated with the rumbling. None of your interventions has helped. And when the rage stage starts, that is when the dinosaur has gotten into the control room. The air traffic controller has been shut out, locked out. So nothing is going. There is no rhyme or reason. There's no talking about it, nothing. Okay, You cannot intervene. The only time that you can intervene, and it is often, I tell people, it is best not to intervene physically, unless there's a chance that the child or your child might self-harm. Otherwise, don't intervene. The child will act during the rage stage impulsively, emotionally, and sometimes explosively. The behaviors will either be externalized or internalized. So they will shut down, or they would start kicking, shouting, biting, hitting, throwing objects, or hurting themselves. So as long as it's safe, you don't need to intervene. But a good intervention that Brenda Miles shared is a home base. This is a place where the child is sent to a quiet or dedicated room with very few distractions, very few things that they can break. Do not send them into the dining room where all your china is when an autistic child has a breakdown. The autistic child is going to win, not the china, I promise you. So it needs to be a quiet room. What works brilliantly in a classroom environment is something as simple as a big box where a mini fridge or something was in. Just cut it open for a crawl space. Inside, put a weighted blanket or a weighted lap pad. You can put a fidget spinner and make sure there is something they can hold on to, maybe streamers, maybe make sure it's dark. You can put nice little glow in the dark stars on the top of the box so they can go in there, lie down, put on their noise cancelling headphones, and they will calm down and de-stress. So that's a nice option for a classroom. Doesn't always work. Sometimes we're too late. Keep verbalization at a minimum. It doesn't help to talk with them. They are not in their logical brain. They are not hearing you. They are not listening to you. Talking makes it worse because that's just another assault on the senses. So they are already in sensory overload. Now you are talking, telling them, look at me, do this, stop. It's going to make it worse. Okay. And for those of you, the parents that are scared that home basing is an escape from schoolwork, it's not. Okay? There's neurological differences with other children, and if we are being in an inclusive school, we have to meet them where they are at, and we need to create an environment to induce calm. Now, all of the fighting and kicking and screaming or freezing has stopped. It can be 10 minutes later, it can be 15 minutes later, it can be 3 hours later, it can be a whole school day later, it can be a whole night later. The recovery stage starts. Okay, and this means the child will start to calm down, most probably start to withdraw, and often they cannot recall how they behave. And if they can recall, they usually deny any sort of wrongdoing. They will think of reasons why it isn't them. In extreme cases, a child may feel very exhausted. It is exhausting. If you're a parent or a professional working with autistic kids, if you are exhausted, you have no idea how exhausted that child is. So they may fall asleep. During the recovery stage, children are often not ready to learn. So they've calmed down, but you as a teacher cannot go back and tell them, okay, we were busy with multiplications, we are going on with that. They will not be ready. You can give them other work that they are used to, but to try and teach them new work in the recovery stage is not going to happen. Very important. Okay, so it's often best accomplished by directing the child to a motivating task. So I like to use task boxes there. Maybe to have them sort through things, do a sorting task, or use an interactive book. It's things that they still learn, they are still working, but they don't have that much pressure on the cortex to start working at top form automatically. Remember, the cortex or the air traffic controller still needs to fix everything that the dinosaur and the monkey destroyed in the air traffic control room. This is what not to do during a meltdown. Do not shame the child. Screaming at your age, stop crying, you're not a baby. It's not going to help. Okay. Reasoning and arguing is not going to help. Even an autistic child with low support needs, in other words, that is high functioning, will find it impossible to have a rational conversation in the middle of a meltdown. Remember, the air traffic controller or the cortex is shut down for business. No rational thought is working. Avoid threatening the child. You will be ignored. You will get angrier, and that will just escalate the situation. Do not leave the child alone. Give them their space, but do not leave them alone. You have to see that they are not getting themselves into a dangerous situation. Don't let someone else handle the situation. So a lot of the times the child will go into meltdown and the teacher will go and call the principal, or the mom will go and call the dad or her best friend, because that person, we've all heard that. Well, they won't do it with me. I will get them to do that. They will not. You're going to upset the child even more, because a new person coming into the situation is another threat that gets perceived by the limbic system. And another thing that the amygdala has to contend with and try and see what kind of thing must he do to save the child. So the best thing as a parent that you can do during a meltdown is to keep calm. I know it's not. I'm preaching to the choir. I know how difficult it is, but that is in essence the best thing you can do. And then I want to love you and leave you with something that an autism support group gave out to a parent group. So the Americans, we call it earbuds in South Africa, and I think in England it's also earbuds, but in America they call it Q-tips. And so they left each parent a Q-tip under their chair in the group, and it was so cute. The Q-tip stands for quit taking it personally. And that's the best advice you can ever be given. Quit taking your child's meltdowns personally. It is not because you are a bad parent. It is not because you are doing everything wrong. It is not because you should have known that the Christmas lights that were flickering is going to set him off. It is not because you should have known that driving in the car and putting on the radio and putting on a song that isn't the song that your child likes is going to cause a meltdown. You cannot always foresee things. Quit taking it personally. It is not something you are doing wrong. It is absolutely the limbic system that is getting overwhelmed and the amygdala that is trying to protect it, that is causing the meltdown. So, if you have any questions, I'm not going to do questions at the moment, but if you have any questions, I think you are more than welcome to email me at info@neuronavigate.com. You will also be able to get a copy of this recording as well as my details from Autism Connect. It will be loaded on the website, I think, and on the Facebook page. I'm not sure, speaking under correction. But you will be able to get in touch and ask all the questions that you want to. So for now, I am going to say goodbye, stop the share, and I'm going to love you and leave you. Okay, goodbye.